Hello. I want to take a few minutes today just to discuss with you um, the reason I told the brave little tailor like I did. First off, I wanted to keep intact the integrity of the original story told by Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm, but I also wanted to add details to the story and embellish it a little bit to help a modern reader understand some of the symbolism that is in the story. Now, of course, it's my interpretation of it, and so you know eh, you have to know that it may not be accurate to what the Grimms intended. I'm ready to accept that, but any story has as part of the storytelling element in it altogether is that people take away from stories what they need, and so this is um, what I suppose what I needed in the story and what I brought to it from my background. So I hope you will view the story and take a look at it and come up with your own interpretation of the story. Children will view the story much differently than adults will. In fact, I do not recommend sharing this video with a child under the age of 14 because they don't need to be analyzing a story. They just experience it. And then as they experience it, they take from the story what they need to take and formulate in their own minds. One of the things that I suppose children will take from the brave little tailor is the idea that, hey, I might be smaller and not as strong, but I can still be confident and I can still stick up for myself in the face of a bully. So it's a great story to tell to help students become more confident with themselves, to deal with bullying situations or with a sibling or an older sibling or a boy or a girl who is just kind of taking advantage of their weakness or their um, compassionate personality, if you will. And it'll perhaps bring a little bit of strength in them to stand up for themselves in those situations, because only by doing so will they slow the bullying down in their life. So that's one thing you can take from the story. And really, that's the archetype meaning of the story in general. It's the idea that if one is confident, if one walks upright with your head up rather than stooping over with your head down, you're going to be a lot more successful in life. That just makes a lot of sense. But that idea is grounded in psychology today. And if you take a look at children in general, for the most part, any child under the age of 7 senses their greatness. They sense that they are so much greater than their circumstances. They may be dependent upon their parents and their siblings, and they uh, obviously wouldn't survive very long without their support in place. Yet they view themselves as lords and kings and have a sense of their divinity. Some may even have a sense that they might be God. And because they are just almost one with the universe in general. That's typical of a child up to the age of 7. And so if we look at the brave little Tailor story, you will notice that the number 7 comes up really quickly right at the beginning with the 7 flies, representing the age in which a child begins to step away from their childhood and move in to a different phase of their life. And that's a critical age. I call it the age of accountability. And that is because it becomes the point in which they have to come with terms on whether they are going to accept, reject their childhood dreams, their childhood sense of self, their childhood vision of their greatness. And it will be challenged. There will be no question as they move out into the world after age 7 that what they did not question at all in their early years will now be will now be questioned, and not only questioned but tried thoroughly up against great challenges in their life. So in the story of the brave little Tailor, he has this, heroic image of himself, and he heads out into the world through the city gates. That's representing that change in, or I should say, just going into the age of accountability. Then the story is broken into 3 parts. It's broken into the part where he is dealing with the giant on the top of the mountain. I call those the rock and the tree scenarios. And then he has the incident at the great castle with the giants in the bed. And finally, the other 3 challenges in the palace in order to win over the king's princess for his bride. Now, a Christian may recognize, it may be a stretch, but I see a correlation between those 3 tests that the brave Tailor has to go through and the 3 temptations that Christ experiences after his 40 days of fasting. Maybe you'll see that as well. For the very first challenge that he has to face in this story is to convert stone into water rather than stone into bread like Christ had to do. This experience, and I don't want to go too much into the story because I don't want to give the story away. You have to go listen to the story to hear it. But the brave little Tailor is able to resolve the stone incident by releasing his appetites and his desires to the heavens, where they never return again. And then with this same giant, he also has to help him carry a large, massive oak tree. And that is like the weight of the world upon you, or the weight of one's sins. What that's meaning is, when we violate our conscience, why that it goes with us, and it just hangs on our back. We almost wish we could forget it, but for some reason it continues to haunt us through our lives like a giant log on us that we must bear. And of course, in this story, the little Tailor, he's just sitting on the log, letting the giant carry him, and it's quite almost like child's play for him. And so, what this can teach us is if we can maintain in our lives a state of being where we have meaning, if we maintain our faith in our our divine calling, if you will, and have confidence in who we are, why life and suffering become irrelevant to us. And in the Christian tradition, that is in essence what we're doing when we hand over the things that we are bearing on our backs and in our minds over to Christ, and He bears them for us. Now, the tailor becomes so light that in the next instance, with the cherry tree, gets flipped right up over the tree. Now, the second great test is in the castle itself, where the giants are roasting innocent lambs, which, of course, represent the Lamb of God being slain. But more importantly, here is that the bed experience, because the bed represents the tailor having to face death, which is illness, hardship, persecution, wars, foes, so forth, something that threatens his life, something that causes great physical harm or pain. And fortunately, he is not killed, but the giants think he is, and then he comes out the next morning, risen, almost as if he had rose from the dead. He overcome death. And of course, we know that Christ, in his next temptation, he's asked to leap off a precipice and the angels will save him, which he does not do. But later in his life, he does accept that challenge in essence by giving himself on the cross. And then on the third day, he rises from the dead, making it possible for everybody to rise from the grave. So the tailor here in these first instances is really overcoming his physical needs, his physical body, even to the point of death. And those are the first two great tests. Now, the third one is not so much with our savage physical bodies, and it turns to not just kind of sacrificing those, but now it's turning to, what are we going to do to earn, if you will, the lovely bride? And what challenges we're going to have to face as we go out and really serve in the world to show our love. It's the test of love. It's the test of whether you're going to serve God or you're going and your fellow man, or you're going to serve the world and your selfish interests. And in this story, with the brave tailor, the king gives him three challenges. Again, this number three comes up a lot in the story, but this, as all fairy tales, representing the power of God. But these three challenges that he must face against two monstrous giants, against the unicorn and the ferocious boar, is all done to win the princess for his bride. Now, the princess is symbolic of love. And in this story, it's literally a wife or someone you're going to marry. And it certainly can be that way in our own lives as well. To win over a beautiful, lovely bride is no easy task. But it also is symbolic of all the people in that is within our realm of service, all the people within whom we serve and try to help, so um, to show our love for. It's the test of charity. How much do you love your fellow man? And of course, the tailor overcomes all these horrific challenges, which you'll have to read about in the story. But then, once he finally wins over the bride, just as if Christ wins over death and then um, inherits the church um, by serving all of fellow men, then the story ends with this kind of question in our minds. Brilliant by the Grimms to bring this kind of coalescing it into this last question at the end. Was he a imposter the whole time? Was he falsifying his identity? And by all, in a legal sense, I suppose, by our earthly laws, he had, although he never denied he was not a tailor. It was just that everyone assumed he was the whole time, some great warrior. But at the end of the story, there's this question: should he be arrested? Was he just not who he really was? Well, it ends with these officers fleeing and won't arrest him because they're afraid of him. And the reason is because they witnessed with their own eyes that he indeed overcome those two giants, the unicorn and the boar. They knew who he was. They knew that he did actually kill those. And so they fled, leaving us with the question of whether the tailor was actually fulfilling a higher law, fulfilling a higher identity than one that is beholden by our mortal eyes, but one that we uh, are far more superior than our circumstances, our class, and our um, situation that we might have by our birthright or our genealogy. But we go out into the world knowing that we're much greater than who our own biology is. So that is the interpretation of the story that I have, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you listen to my story now, subscribe to my channel so that you can see it, because it's a lovely story. It's a fun one. It's got a lot of humor in it, but it also has this whole deeper side to it that is so fascinating. View it and see what you think. Maybe you won't see it that way at all. Well, it's getting dark out here. I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you.